Hello, I welcome everyone to the first video of the 36th module, Counseling Approaches, Directive, Non-Directive and Eclectic Counseling. Today, there are numerous schools of thought in counseling used by the professional counselors. Psychoanalysis, person-centered therapy, gestalt therapy, cognitive behavior therapy, transactional analysis, directive, non-directive, eclectic, etc. are few to be named. Each of these approaches is founded based on specific theories and assumptions of human behavior. The counselors and therapists using each method will address problems and issues in different ways. One preliminary way to distinguish basic approaches to counseling is by viewing them as a directive or non-directive methods. Some counselors use one particular method, while others use mixed methods. In directive approach, counseling is understood as advising, guiding, directing, and teaching. In non-directive approach, the counselor is confident that with the right kind of stimulation, the client will be able to deal with his problems by himself. The counselor will integrate both and find a balance between these two extreme approaches in the eclectic approach. This module focuses on key elements of all the three approaches, that is directive, non-directive and eclectic counseling approaches. So the learning objectives of this first video is understanding the concept, characteristics, process, merits and demerits of directive counseling. Directive counseling. According to APA Dictionary of Psychology, directive counseling is an approach to counseling and psychotherapy in which the therapeutic process is directed along the lines considered relevant by the counselor or therapist. Directive counseling is also known as prescriptive counseling, counselor-centered counseling, and directive therapy. E.Z. Williamson pioneered this directive counseling approach. Assumptions of directive counseling approaches are: directive counseling is based on the assumption that the counselor or the therapist's professional training and experience equip them to manage the therapeutic process and guide the client's behavior. Hence, the counselor plays a more active role than the client and prepares the entire plans and see through the process. Another assumption of directive counseling is that counseling is a problem-centered process. Hence, efforts should be focused on the issues and concerns of the counselee. Third, counseling is primarily an intellectual process rather than emotional one. Therefore, in directive counseling, the intellectual aspects is given more weightage than the emotional aspect. Directive counseling tends to be most appropriate when the counselor is aware of the problem or is concerned about the client's behavior or both. It is also used when the client is unaware of the problem or avoids acknowledging it. It is also used characteristics of directive counseling. In the directive counseling process, the counselor plays a very active role where the client plays a passive role. The counselor is active and assumes a larger responsibility to collect, organize, analyze, interpret, and find solutions to the counselee's problem. Second, directive counseling is based on problem-solving approach and solves the crucial problems of the client. Since much importance is given to the problem and not to the individual with the problem, all the efforts are directed to resolve the problem only. Therefore, in no way directive counseling is developmental. This approach is neither in keeping with the counselee's readiness for focus nor any personality development leading to self-understanding and self-directive. Third, the emphasis of directive counseling is on the intellectual content of the counselee's response rather than the counselee's emotional aspect or feeling. Since counselor regulates the entire process of the counseling, the method used is directives, persuasive, and explanatory. It imposes the process, decision, instruction on the counselee to follow it strictly to resolve the problems, and counseling act at the whims of the counselor, and he has got no freedom of his own during the counseling process. Steps in directive counseling. According to E.Z. Williamson, the following steps are involved in directive counseling. First one is analysis, next synthesis, then diagnosis, prognosis, treatment, and follow-up. Analysis. In directive approach counseling, the first step is to have an adequate understanding of the client. The counselor needs to collect sufficient information from various reliable sources using appropriate means to understand the student. The counselor's process of collecting the data from reliable sources using various proper tools and techniques to understand the client is known as analysis stage. Structured interview schedules, psychological tools, and case history are commonly used tools and techniques to gather the correct information. The client and his or her family members, teachers, and peers from both home and school environment can be considered reliable sources to collect the data regarding the client. Synthesis. After collecting enough data, the collected information is sorted out by organizing and summarizing in a logical manner. This step in directive counseling is known as synthesis. The main purpose of this stage is to find out the student's strengths and weaknesses, liabilities, potentials, resources, adjustment and maladjustment areas, interests and habits, and socio-cultural background of the client. Next step is diagnosis. In the diagnosis stage, the counselor will interpret the organized data in relation to the nature of the problem student is facing. In the previous stage, the counselor has identified various shortcomings as well as the potential of the student. Here in this stage, the counselor can connect those shortcomings as the root causes of the student's problems. Next, prognosis. In the stage of prognosis, the counselor predicts the future development of the problem. Prognosis is the counseling term for predicting the likely outcome of the client's chances to survive his situation. A complete prognosis includes the expected duration of the treatment, functions, and description of the cause of the problem. Treatment. Treatment is done to bring about adjustment and readjustment to the individual concerning his or her problem. Client's attitudes and interests are considered during the treatment. The counselor emphasizes the client to develop a life cycle where an effort in the positive direction could lead to success, and success leading to the further efforts and motivation. The treatment stage may include some of the or all of the following procedures. The first one is establishing rapport with the student, interpreting the collected data to the student, advising or planning a program of action with the student, assisting the student in carrying out the plan of action, then referring to the other counselors for assistance diagnosing or counseling. Follow-up. In the follow-up stage, the counselor helps the client time and again to solve the problem through counseling, even when a new situation occurs or the original problem reoccurs. Follow-up with the client is an extremely necessary step. The counselor's role is crucial as he has to make the individual understand and accept his strengths, weaknesses, and faults. Advantages of directive counseling. The first advantage is this technique is considered most economical approach. A more suitable approach for the school counseling because it is less time consuming and the counselor's experiences and specialized knowledge easily influence students who lack experience. Third, the student feels that the counselor is superior in terms of knowledge and therefore a professional relationship takes place. A submissive and highly emotionalized counseling of student can cultivate self-confidence in the individual. Then what are the limitations of directive counseling? The first one is the client does not gain any ability to self-analyze or solving new problems of adjustment with directive counseling. Second, directive counseling made the counselee over-dependent on the counselor. The client never becomes independent of the counselor. Directive counseling is not suitable with problems regarding emotional maladjustment. Fourth, directive counseling does not guarantee that the counselee will not make mistakes in the future since there is no personal growth. In this video, we have discussed about directive counseling. In the next video, we will focus on the non-directive counseling approach. Thank you.